Saint Emma by Josh Bell. At 8 years old, I was dangerously close to being stupid. My parents were very concerned. They yanked Paul and me out of public school and threw us into Catholic school. Maybe Jesus and his dad could help us with all that math. In the menacing wake of another blowout argument, we sat on the couch watching the Pink Panther annoy the painter. I could still feel the rumble of the front door, the tiny earthquake, and the clap of the door jamb. "Are you guys going to get divorced?" I asked, from under the spy holes of the green and gold crocheted blanket. Paul was 2 years older and never asked. "Of course not," Mom said. "You promise?" She held up her palm. He didn't believe her. I believed whatever Paul believed. Now the little painter was covered in pink and furious. It was a dark, rain-soaked morning when we started Catholic school. A terrible magic trick. Poof! All our friends were gone, and we wore navy sweater vests and button-down shirts and tan slacks like dickheads. But hang on. All the girls were in short skirts and knee-highs and wore prim ponytails that bobbed when they walked. Suddenly the uniforms didn't seem so outrageous. I just spent all of second grade looking up Miss Delgado's skirt, so I was well honed for all sorts of perverted fuckery. I'd elbow Scott Bowman, and his eyes would bulge, and we'd whisper and giggle, and wait for my nylon leg to appear. "Sit still and stop that chattering!" Miss D was 30 and fit, with dark shoulder-length hair and sharp features, and she was all out of patience. Kids called her a bitch behind her back, but I disagreed. She reminded me of a cat, and her coldness made my heart race. Well, here I was, and all of it with me now, in this strange and dour religious setting. Instead of Miss Delgado and her pencil-lined skirts, there were grave nuns in sheets. Instead of the slow exploration of this intriguing new sexual energy and its boundless subtleties, there was sin. Sitting in my bed at night, sitting in the shower or on the toilet, sitting under the stairs in my secret fort, or in the cool grass in the backyard under the stars. Sitting in the woods high up in a tree, listening to the twittering indifference of the whole natural universe as the fireworks shattered behind my lids. In the colorful stained glass morning, with the smell of wood and incense and the clatter of soft reverb against the silence, we watched, afraid. Our knees on hard wood, eyes upturned at the sad wooden Jesus hanging there on the wall. His eyes upturned, searching, and God up there somewhere, peering down. No words yet for his son about that cross. No way to eternal salvation without sagging doom. I watched him closely each morning. He looked very real to me. A few weeks later, I sat blankly over my geography test in Sister Margaret's history class. The transition to a new school had not cured my inability to absorb information. I sensed the familiar fear and embarrassment closing in like slavering jackals. The classroom was small and cold. The walls were pricked violently by the corners of huge maps and the sun-bleached faces of saints. We were 25 kids in 5 neat rows. The desks were badly scarred and the chairs were cold gray buckets. I tried not to fidget as the soft light from the cataract windows spilled across the yellowed floor. Why, God? I thought. Why am I so stupid? But instead of an answer, there was a faint, irregular creaking. I glanced around at all the rasping pencils skating over paper. I hadn't labeled any shapes on my map yet, but had managed a little smiley face in the corner with its tongue out. I tried to ignore the new sound and the cumulus clouds of self-loathing, and went back to my test. The noise got louder. I scribbled a cowboy hat on the smiley face. There was a soft moan that made my ears prick up. I listened closely. The creaking sound changed suddenly. A steady chirp, chirp, chirp. I looked up. The test takers were oblivious. Sister Margaret was oblivious. But where from? I thought, like a Neanderthal. I scanned the room, then jabbed an elbow on the rail of my chair and turned slowly around. Behind me sat the beautiful Emma Morelli, who didn't appear to be taking her test either. Her eyes were closed save for a thin white U which caught the light and gleamed as she rolled her neck slowly. She was concentrating very hard on nothing. Her hands were out of sight, presumably under her desk. Red raspberries bloomed on her cheeks. Then I noticed she was thrusting her lower body against her seat in quick little circles. It's her chair, I realized. The chirping sound. But none of that mattered. Nothing mattered. There was only Emma now. A floral muskiness rose in soft waves and made my nostrils flare. My pulse quickened. I spun back around in my seat. The map was blurry now. The smiley face was a gray blob. Chirp, chirp, chirp. My heart was racing. Chirp, chirp, chirp. There was a soft whimpering rising behind me like the involuntary click and groan of some great thirst about to be quenched. Then a dog whistle beat of bright piercing silence that felt like floating on your back with your ears under the water. Then she did drink. There was fierce shuddering and muffled incantations that buzzed through me like a sad song and moved me in that same beautiful way. My face was warm. I flicked my gaze guiltily around the room. What the hell just happened? Paul and I got off the bus and made our way down the meandering hill in the bright sun. I told him about Emma. Endless rows of cookie-cutter condos eased by as we talked. At the very end, I said, it was like she stubbed her toe in the library and liked the pain. Paul shook his head and chuckled. She was fingering herself. What? I cocked my head to watch him. From what you explained, he reshouldered his sagging backpack. It sounds like she was fingering herself. I only had the vaguest notion of what that meant. I had a dream once where a woman pulled down her underwear and lifted her shirt to show me what was essentially a second belly button. Eventually I understood. She was doing what I did. I didn't think anyone in 3rd grade even knew about that yet. I loved that. I loved her. I wasn't alone anymore. She did it daily, sometimes twice a day, in different classes. There was no set pattern. Then I'd rush home and do it, and think of her, always of her, red and shuddering. One day in English class, Chris Nelson looked over just as Emma was having a real fit of an orgasm. We watched her implode like an astonished black hole. Her face was a shiny purple plum. Chris's shocked eyes found mine from across the room, and we nearly lost it. We'd hung out during recess a few times, but this was the fast friend maker, the blood swap handshake. We got absolutely nothing done for weeks. How do you think she got like that? Chris was hunched idly on the swing next to mine in the sharp November air. I kept swinging despite my frozen fingers. You think she just figured it out? I never liked this line of questioning. Did you just figure it out? I said. The other kids yelped and howled in the upper lot. We preferred the old run-down playground. Maybe, he began, then searched the ground for something. Maybe she has an older sister? The bell rang. I jumped off the swing, stumbled over to the cracked concrete stairs, and made my way to the upper lot. There was an afternoon sermon today that I'd forgotten about. I followed the winter jackets and the plumes of frozen laughter toward the side entrance. I was at the end of a single-file line, then I heard Chris behind me. All of us good boys and girls filing into the beautiful scallop-roofed church like shiny pearls. I thought God might look at Emma and decide out of hand that she was no pearl. Well, that was okay. That was fine. A diamond could never be a pearl. By mid-year, the writing was on the wall. I remember the starched, button-up counselor asking questions. Is everything okay at home? You guys have enough to eat? I scarfed down everyone's leftover pizza crust during lunch, and I guess word got around. I just really liked pizza crust. Everybody get along okay? You guys feel safe? I nodded. Then a few periods later, it was Mr. Falk, my art teacher. You're a talented artist, Max, but Sister Margaret says your grades just aren't cutting it. Don't you want to learn about the world and about Jesus and the apostles? All I want to do is draw, I said. That's all? He waited for me to say something. That's it? Nothing else? I want to play music, too. He arched a bushy eyebrow and stroked his salt and pepper beard. Before long, I was for the church choir. I remember thinking, great, more church. But it was fun to sing, and it felt good. Then there was confession. I never mentioned Emma, even though I was consumed with guilt about her. I knew how you came to discover such things at this age. I suspected Chris knew, too. So I just talked around it. I'd shut the door to the confessional and kneel and stare at the worrisome screen in the cedar dark. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 2 weeks since my last confession. He'd say something automatic. Was I supposed to respond? I never knew. Go on, my son. I'd tell of cursing and of impure thoughts, and of using the Lord's name in vain. The priest would slip me the bill, and I'd pay in garbled Hail Marys and Our Fathers, and hope that even the lies I omitted were forgiven. I figured God could do that if he wanted. He could do anything. One snowy day in March, I realized Emma was gone. She hadn't been around all week. There were rumors she'd broken her arm, but I had my doubts. Her absence was a rude awakening. My spirit ached. I'd spent most of the year staring at her with bulging cartoon hearts for eyes, too afraid to talk to her, and now she was a ghost. My grades, too. I'd have to buckle down to pass all my classes. Emma's reality was far worse, though. Chris told everyone with ears what she'd been up to, and they were all talking about it. They laughed and sniggered and passed judgment, and now she was gone. A broken arm, A cloven soul? Who knows? I tried to stay out of it. I tried to seem mature and smart and above it all. For the first time since second grade, I tried very hard to pay attention and to finish my assignments. I tried and tried. Well, it was too late for me, but Chris managed to squeak by. They called our names one by one on the last day of school to congratulate us for moving on to the 4th grade. They called everyone's name but mine. Poof. All my friends were gone. Again. I cried and cried right there in my chair. I cried as quietly as I could. My face and cheeks burned. I cried for my dignity, for my shattered ego, for the unforgiving embarrassment that swaddled me and pinned me to that cold seat for all the kids to see and to fear. A rare poisonous insect. They all snuck cautious glances. I cried for Emma. I knew I'd never see her again. I cried for Jesus and his likeness fastened high up on the church wall through his wrists and feet by railroad ties. I cried for Paul and for me and for the end of our family. It was all my fault. The grades, Emma, the divorce, even Jesus' cruel fate. It was all tied together somehow. Why, God? I thought. But if he didn't talk to his only son, why would he talk to me? We took the bus home. The yellow doors chuffed open and the kids exploded out into the street and went laughing and whooping down the hill. Paul tried to cheer me up with a hug and a punch on the arm before peeling off with John Wilson for a Nintendo marathon. I wished them luck and headed home. Only I didn't go home. I made my way down to our cul-de-sac, spiked my book bag in the dirt behind our house, and kept on walking. I plodded down the crabgrass hill, past the huge boulders, through the wheezing swamp, and into the woods. I found my tree and climbed it, then stood in the crook of the high limb, listening. The birds still chirped. The breeze was warm and the leaves sighed gently. What grade was I in up here? How smart was I? How dumb? I could hear the little brook in the distance and smell the cold water. I felt myself returning to normal. It'll be fine, I thought. Paul was right. Grade school wasn't real life. Religion wasn't real life. This was life. This was church. My church. The rich soil, the wet fungus eating everything, and all the delicate sounds born out of the primordial silence. Of course God didn't speak. This was it. The ticking, creaking, chirping silence. And I knew a thing or two about the wordless sermon. I thought of Emma when Sister Margaret arranged our desks in a big circle and we took turns reading from our children's illustrated Bible. Emma was doing it again, right there, in plain sight. I was the only one who noticed. Matt Forrest, the doubter, was telling the disciples how he didn't believe Gary Barone could have risen from the dead. Said it was impossible. "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands," he said, "and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand in his side," he shook his head, "I will not believe." I kept losing my place in the story. I couldn't take my eyes off Emma. She was directly in front of me, facing me. She kneaded the heavy fabric of her dress in her lap with the economy and precision of a seasoned seamstress. No wonder no one noticed. It was very subtle, almost artistic, and noiseless now, not a single chirp. She opened her legs slightly and her head began to roll. Her cheeks brightened. I wanted to climb up on my desk and howl at the rectangle moon. Then Gary Barone appeared once again amongst the disciples, only this time Matt was there. "Peace be with you," Gary said. "Put your finger here," he held up his hands. "Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Emma shuddered. Her eyes rolled in two slow, mindless circles, then locked onto mine. I didn't dare move. I couldn't look away. My heart slammed against my chest. She stared right at me and rubbed and rubbed and rubbed. Her face was beautiful and calm and began to darken a deep crimson. I felt the wind in my hair and her green eyes on me. I felt the sun get bright and warm through the leaves. "My Lord, my God," said Matt. "Because you have seen me, you believe," Gary said. "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet still believe." My eyes were closed, but I could still see. She was out there somewhere. God, too. And so it was never a question of belief. Emma thrust her hips once, twice, then wilted in her chair. And high up in my tree, in this adjacent universe, the universe where I'd failed third grade, the universe where our family was broken, the universe where I'd become the son, the brother, the husband, the father, and the old man, the fireworks did hiss and bloom and shatter.